Welcome to Hood Champion Boxing and Sports. In boxing, you find a way to win or you find a way to lose. So, this Saturday, Amanda Serrano and Katie Taylor are going to be fighting. Done a few videos on it. Not going to get into any specifics on that, except it's this Saturday. Tune in. They're getting paid big money. But since we're talking about money, Jake Paul is promoting Serrano and Katie Taylor is being promoted by Eddie Hearn. Now, this is the thing. We know Jake Paul is, actually, I want to commend him. He's doing a good job at promoting Amanda Serrano. He's making sure to not make the event about himself. However, Jake Paul is a promoter. However, Jake Paul is a marketing genius. However, Jake Paul is going to seize an opportunity to put himself out there because he's out there for the next opportunity. He's done what he was supposed to do for Amanda Serrano. He got her here to the big stage. The work is done. It's just a matter of them having the weigh in and getting to the fight with no hiccups. So now you see Jake Paul is starting to execute his game plan, which is seizing opportunities to put himself in set himself up for the next opportunity. Who better to do that with than Eddie Hearn? And Eddie Hearn got caught off guard during a press conference today because they were talking about Taylor and Serrano, and of course Jake Paul expects for Serrano to win. He explained why. She hasn't lost in a while. She's a heavy hitter. And then Eddie Hearn feels that Katie Taylor is just going to be too much for Serrano. Is going to basically overwhelm her with skill and boxing and just stamina. So at that point, Jake Paul decides to place a bet, right? He said if Serrano loses, Eddie Hearn can take all of his jewelry. Eddie Hearn makes a joke about, well, it's not really much. $10,000 isn't really much, saying he had cheap jewelry. So Jake Paul's like, okay, it's worth about $500,000. Eddie Hearn's like, nah, let's try $1 million. Now see, this is what Jake Paul wants. This is Jake Paul's game. It's not Eddie Hearn's game. Jake Paul wants to have these kind of this back and forth banter. He wants to have these exchanges. He wants to have these bets, okay? Because that gives him something to feed his YouTube audience, his social media audience. And Eddie Hearn wasn't smart enough to catch that and to just back away from it. Now, Eddie Hearn was witty enough to kind of roast Jake Paul, especially his jewelry. But instead of Eddie Hearn having the backbone to be like, all right, this is all YouTube rubbish, next question, and just totally kill it, totally diffuse it, he got caught up in the back and forth, and now you have this $1 million bet. Now, that is Jake Paul all the way. That's not Eddie Hearn, okay? Eddie Hearn even went on to say during a subsequent interview that he felt like the back and forth got a little carried away, and now here we are at $1 million bet. But what I took from that is Eddie Hearn is telling himself, crap, how in the world did I get sucked into this guy's game? He should have just stopped, but Eddie Hearn didn't want to look, it's like peer pressure, man. He didn't want to look weak. He didn't want to look embarrassed. He didn't want people to laugh at him. He didn't want people to talk about him. So he carried on with the exchange until he got himself in a position. Now he can't back out. That is the same thing as just peer pressure. That's what it is. So now he's like, well, I can't back out now. He was even making jokes about, hey, I don't know about this guy. I got to get the paperwork, make sure, he'll pay if his fighter loses. But it was more a jovial kind of statement. But Jake Paul is serious as a heart attack. And when these kind of things happen, I think for Jake Paul, it doesn't affect his fighter at all. Because his fighter, they know how Jake Paul is. They saw what happened with him and Tyron Woodley and the whole tattoo and all that crap. So Jake Paul can come out there and make bets and talk about beating people up and knocking people out and continue with the self-proclaimed that he's the best boxer ever, who in 2 years is going to beat Canelo, right? We expect that from Jake Paul. So his fighter is probably sitting somewhere watching on TV laughing. not could care less about the bet that was made that she's gonna win. She's just laughing. It's like no one's taking that seriously because that's Jake Paul. He does stuff like that. Now with Eddie Hearn, he doesn't do stuff like that. And with Katie Taylor, I think she's a bit more disciplined than Serrano. And what I mean is, even in sense of humor, I think Serrano's a bit more open, joking, a little bit more crazy with a sense of humor, and just kind of see things Jake Paul does as laughable when he makes a bet that she's going to win. I can see Katie Taylor taking that as added pressure that she doesn't need. And I don't know, man. I don't think that helps her in her situation. I think that hurts Katie Taylor. I think that was kind of reckless by Eddie Hearn. He should have just dead that. He shouldn't even. He should have spoke highly of her and said he expects her to win. But when the back and forth and the betting started, see, that's all YouTube nonsense. That's social media nonsense. That's Jake Paul nonsense. Eddie Hearn should have, escape stepped that, but he didn't. He remained static, held his ground, and now he found himself in a position where he got this $1 million bet. And like I said, I think Katie Taylor is a phenomenal boxer, but I think Serrano's going to knock her out. And it's just really unfortunate. Now, a lot of people are saying that it doesn't matter if Taylor loses, Eddie Hearn's going to make the money off of the pay-per-view sales alone. What's $1 million to him? But my thing is, how does this affect Katie Taylor? I just think it sucks that he went out there and got caught up in the back and forth banter, because that's just, these fighters have enough distractions going on right now. There's a historic women's championship going down, Madison Square Garden. There's a lot of people from Ireland flying in. There's a whole bunch of Puerto Ricans there flying in. There's tons and tons of media. It's an extremely huge event, bigger than anything we've seen in a long time, just because of what this fight stands for. But when you think about this wager that they're making, that's just an additional distraction that neither fighter needs, but more so for Katie Taylor. She's leaving her home country. She's coming over here to the States. She's used to being in pretty decent fights, but she's not a home soil, so her level of comfort may not be the same. So why make her even more uncomfortable? And that's how I see it. So it doesn't matter what accomplishments they've had as far as the Olympics, as far as professionals, and how proud they are of the event. You don't need someone going there feeling like they have to win. That could force Taylor, in my opinion, to fight a little harder, a little more reckless. And that's going to play into Serrano's hands, as opposed to her just being comfortable in boxing and not worrying about, I need to make sure I'm ahead in the scorecards. So I'm telling you right now, Serrano's laughing at what Jake Paul's doing. She's not going to think at all that I need to come in here and do something, spectacular, and to make sure that I win this fight because of a bet. She can care less. She's there to do her job, do the business, and be done. And I just think I wouldn't want that pressure on me, especially in front of the whole world, because now if she loses, it's not that she just lost to a better fighter or she just lost in a competitive matchup. She lost a fight and cost her promoter $1 million. Although Eddie Hearn has to pay that, the guilt that can hang over her, I just think can be overwhelming. And in my opinion, that's something that Eddie Hearn, I think he's looking at it now and saying, I probably shouldn't have, got caught up in this guy's web, and now here it is, I'm stuck. But the difference with the two of them is Jake Paul, he's gonna make a crazy bet like that because he doesn't care if he loses. If he cares that his fighter loses, but he doesn't care about $1 million. But he's like, I think he's confident Amanda's gonna win. But he's like, if she wins, I'm gonna look for that $1 million, and he's just gonna give it to Amanda. So basically, Jake Paul's trying to set up an additional bonus for his fighter, and Eddie Hearn got himself caught up in something that he probably shouldn't have. So that's the 2 cents on Eddie Hearn and Jake Paul. Guys over here making stupid bets, but I think he's going to adversely affect Eddie Hearn's fighter, Katie Taylor, and we'll see what happens for the big bet this Saturday. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. So please, shout out to all the veterans. You guys keep safe. I appreciate the support. As always, I'm in the breeze.